Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Guess who isn't dead after all? Welcome to this somewhat abrupt next episode of Retro Ninja Gaming. In case you're wondering where I've been for the past bit, not to bore you with too much of the details, but to summarize it briefly, a combination of new stuff at work, some online course stuff, generally being sick, and funny story, it turns out I actually really suck at Final Fight 1 Super Nintendo, so that run has been going very poorly up to this point. However, for a nice change of pace, and hopefully success, let's go with a rather interesting port for the Mega Drive, being the first Double Dragon. Of course, you're starring as Billy and Jimmy Lee at this point, and Marion just took a bit of a beating, which unfortunately is one of the most recognizable sights in video gaming, especially if you're used to the old arcade beat-em-ups. In this case, I'm actually doing a for fun run to test something that I had heard about for the longest time, but never put to practice. Namely, the absurdity that is this particular port's abuse of the elbow attack, which is basically meant to be a back elbow to knock opponents that are behind you. But as I'm beginning to learn right now and demonstrate in the course of this video, it's horribly abusable. The fact is, if you're actually able to line them up right for most of your enemies, you can basically just take them out with a bunch of elbows on their own. Of course, this strategy only really works as long as you then don't get cornered or surrounded by anybody, but other than that, it is unfortunately turning out really sound. I'm not sure if this is limited to the Genesis port really, or if this was also as effective and destructive in the arcade port. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen. Technically on the video mark, we're still below 2 minutes, and I'm basically at the boss. No, correction. I am at the boss of stage 1 already. Not counting the introduction screen setup and everything. And once you get the one above on his own, you can actually avoid scrolling in the other enemy entirely, but I've gone too far. Yeah. Even if you manage to scroll them in and just keep them separated, it's not actually that hard. I'm just kind of playing very badly right now. Don't run into the Obobos. It's not a good idea. They have one of the few responses to the whole elbow strategy, being as this roper runs away. The only response the Obobo has is that he can actually pick up and throw you. And there are only maybe 2-3 enemies that can actually properly counter the whole back elbow strategy throughout the entire game. One being an Obobo that can throw you. Two, actually no, I don't think it's until the second game that Linda actually starts getting a back of her own, but the boss for this particular stage, which will become a regular enemy later on, the Lee brother clone, will also have a back elbow of his own, thankfully nowhere near as devastating as the player character version. And maybe the only other character that can get away with it is Machine Gun Willie at the end of the game, because he has a gun. Now, as you can probably guess, this is based off the original arcade title, unlike the Nintendo version, which, due to the limitations on how many players it could have there and general memory issues, had to circumvent things and basically invent newer sections of the game in order to fit within that format. Here, pretty much you could play as 2 players, although getting this particular cart might be a little more troublesome, since I don't recall the port for this particular arcade title being too extensive for the Mega Drive. And admittedly, it's actually not that good of a port, I'm going to be honest, although as a strange tidbit here, the port for Double Dragon 1 for the arcade actually came after the port that was done for the second game, which, if this one seems might have a few issues, as if I were playing this a little more fire, you would be able to see some of the hit detection issues that can generally go on, is when you're striking an enemy or attempting to, and when they try to do the same to you, to be honest. The port for Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, which was done by Palsoft, is actually much worse. And it's kind of a complete travesty that is filled with hit detection issues, slowdown, which, depending on either the exact creation of the game, or I've seen some really bad ROM sets that really exaggerate slowdown, basically render the thing basically nigh impossible to play through without gritting your teeth the whole time, and just kind of general issues all along with that game, but we're going to save that for a second viewing or another viewing later on. Thankfully, since this game actually came in later in the series, or later in the system lifestyle. Not the word, Lifeline, that's the one I meant to say. This was actually a much more improved port, getting a lot more of the original content actually done correctly at this point. But also, let's see. I was trying to get to a point a second ago. Actually, no, yeah, the other thing I was going to mention about that is just generally, I'm not sure if this released properly outside of the Mega Drive regions, basically being Japan and maybe select parts of Europe off the top of my head. This never got a proper North American release, nor did the technical first game that came out, being Double Dragon 2 for the Mega Drive. And while we did see Double Dragon 3 in the Mega Drive or Sega Genesis in North American regions, let's be honest, that game sucked, because the original arcade game it was based on also sucked, and is basically the black sheep of the family. And that's even keeping in mind Double Dragon 5, The Shadow Falls, which most people prefer to forget about. Getting back to the nitty-gritty of Double Dragon itself, probably one of the biggest issues with the original arcade runs are that those games were really on the short side. They were just, other than being considerably difficult at times, mostly due to the enemy spawning, they were actually pretty short jaunts through the game. Couple of levels each, I believe. 5 to 6 in most cases. I think this one is only 5 stages, really. We're actually already near the end of the title, to be exact. So, when it came to the home ports for those games, we actually had to, especially for the Nintendo version, they had to resort to basically making whole new sections in order to kind of stretch out the gameplay a lot. Otherwise, it would have been really short experiences overall. As I'm getting walloped here. And how did I not die? Thank you, Abobo. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, no, generally they were really short experiences all around. Mostly just kind of quarter munchers. And at the end of this game, they kind of did a cop-out where you can't have a ending where you have both brothers survive. Everyone usually knows how the kind of the last-minute double cross works in the arcade section here, where you're forced to face off against your brother if there's a second player handy. But realistically, the best versions of the game were probably the Nintendo versions, just because of how much revisionist sections and whole new added content they had to do in order to make the thing viable for home markets, because as they were just too damn short for the Double Dragon section, or the original Double Dragon port of there. In order to compensate for the lack of proper two-player mode, you had several new missions going on there, and kind of further extended platforming sections, although let the record state, if this were the NES version, the cave section, especially some of the platforming that, are realistically pains in the asses and kind of bullshit if you end up missing. And pretty much kind of trial by error in some parts as well. But in terms of how they got it to work from the next title on, the next title is honestly where they really got the thing whole set up right for the most part. Because let's be honest, the best game in the trilogy, especially for the NES set, is Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, which on top of having extended stage sections and more platforming, although a little more refined, except for that one area where you have to jump over disappearing platforms over a spiked pit. You all know what I'm talking about. That was complete BS. For the most part, it was a much more enjoyable adventure, and actually added a new ending to the game, with the introduction of a Shadow Master, which wasn't present in the original arcade game. It was just Willy, who is actually completely absent in the NES game altogether for the second title, which is interesting. And the new final boss and new ending that they gave there, so they would actually have a happy ending, ended up extending to later ports, such as the PC Engine one, which also added animated cutscenes to the mix, which really emphasized that the whole series has a whole Fist of the North Star / Hokuto no Ken vibe to it, by deliberately making the cutscenes scream at every possible chance it had. As far as I'm personally aware of, all later games in the series would also make a greater emphasis on naming the martial arts that the Lee brothers use, as well as in later recreations like Double Dragon Advance, for example. They would add more story elements that kind of emphasize the style of fighting that they happen to use, and also Willy's motivation for attacking the Lee brothers and kidnapping Marianne among other things, all kind of revolving around the general usage of martial arts throughout these titles, including a counter martial art, which I can't remember the name of, unfortunately. It was mentioned with one of the boss encounters. That was a nice fall. And pretty much would be kind of a mainstay throughout the series after that. Although it was kind of loosely mentioned only in the third NES title, Double Dragon 3, but for reasons which should be obvious to anyone who knows that title, that entire game was rubbish anyway, and is best left unplayed. Much like certain other things like Genesis Battletoads. Games that you should avoid, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, we're on to the second real last boss of the game. Imagine that, another Abobo, only this time green. Since this is in the arcade port, I believe he actually originally had a mohawk or something like that in the original game, but for space constraints they kind of just reuse it there. No, this is seriously the last mission. I was even wrong, ladies and gentlemen. The game really had only 4 missions. Although they make up for it by continuing to have this damn thing. These spikes that... If there's a pattern behind this, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what it is. Its pattern is to irritate the hell out of everyone. At least, thankfully, it can hit everyone. As I am actually doing really badly for health right now. The trick here, ladies and gentlemen, is, while you think I could, why don't I just scroll down? Because you can easily fall into all those pits. There's no invisible wall keeping you safe. And I'm trying to be careful here since I know if as soon as I spawn and go far enough right, there's going to be an enemy that spawns to the left. There we go. And perfect. Thank you. Spear actually helps for change. And things are actually, aside from my very poor health situation, things are actually sitting pretty... What the... God damn it. Remember how I said no invisible walls? Yeah. That sucks. There's a reason to use a continuum, ladies and gentlemen, and accidentally walking into a bed of spikes is not one of them. Although it kind of illustrates that they didn't have a proper flooring there or a proper animation setup. If you did fall in the spikes, you just kind of fall through the ground entirely. And realistically, this whole hallway, it's Abobo's breaking out of walls, which, mind you, why are they breaking walls in their own headquarters? It seems like a bad planning. Maybe they should have set up some doors or something for them. Or they can go around the corner or something. But yeah, there's nothing hard in this hallway, and right after this is the boss chamber, which I'm basically walking into. I'm trying to lure this one last roper off to the side. No, he's not having any of it. He's not scrolling down. He's not being cooperative. I'd say of this boss section here, the first 2 enemies here, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I think in general the ropers in this game have had my number for throughout this entire playthrough. I've always had difficulty. I've had difficulties this whole time with them messing around and getting me cornered. Probably because they're the only other thing, maybe other than me, that can move so quickly. You'd think the Williamses would be able to do the same, but no. And unfortunately, I killed everything a bit too fast because I have 2 Lee Brothers clones at the same time as Willie. This is not the ideal setup. Realistically, under a perfect run, and actually under one of my practice runs, I actually kept... I kept the roper handy while I took care of at least one of the Lee Brothers. That way I only had to deal with a roper who is easily dispatched. Ouch, that hurt. One of the Lee Brothers, and a Williams, and I proceeded to basically elbow and juggle all 3 at the same time, making for an embarrassingly easy victory. It looks like this time I'm actually going to have to work for it a little, as I'm down to... Oh crap, this is actually my last health. Under the default settings, you only have really 1 continue and 2 lives in each of those continues. So now I'm throwing out the left elbow, I'm throwing out the right elbow, I'm throwing one of their elbows. Okay, good, one of the Lee Brother clones are dead, or looking a little more pretty. Okay, I won. The game is over. Once you get Willie to a certain point, especially in what you can say is a vortex of sort, it's over, I won. Not the prettiest win. Not the prettiest of animation as a whole. 1B, okay, wow. We're gonna go with wow, why not? Mostly because I screwed up and I don't know how to scroll these things properly. May you live happily forever. Victory is mine, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, that is Mega Drive Double Dragon 1 in a nutshell. Thanks for watching. We'll hopefully be doing another video within the very near future. See y'all later.